So, picking up where we left off, we were making the point, if we have these innate, if moral foundations are genetic and we have these values, why do we do bad things? Why is it so bad? And one of the explanations is we use defense mechanisms to allow ourselves to fulfill our lower natures all the time. Okay, that's a real thing. There's another explanation though, and it has to do with the study of genocide. There have been, because in the last 100 years or so, we've had horrific examples of genocide. And it was really very recent, and people don't understand, as far as human history is concerned, that we've done some really barbaric things in the last 100 years. And it wasn't that long ago. There's bad things going on right now. Do you realize right now there are more slaves on planet Earth than ever before in history? Right now. There are more people in slavery today than ever before in history. People are doing barbaric things all the time. Okay? And and you know what? All of them, and this is what we're going to be discussing. In the study of genocide, one conclusion that has been arrived at is that most of the acts of barbarism were not committed by people with psychiatric conditions. They were committed by normal people. And so we've got more than just defense mechanisms going on. And this next clip is rather graphic, but it kind of goes through this discussion of genocide in the 20th century. And then it talks about, okay, why? Briefly, okay? So,
what I'm about to go over will be a hard pill to swallow, and it will take some time to unpack. Because once we understand human nature, I suggest the problem of evil falls into context. See, we like to think of ourselves as further along than our primitive ancestors, who engaged in genocide, rape, and torture. But there have been more people murdered in the past 120 years than any other time in our history. The two world wars gave humanity an up-close look at some of the most brutal acts humans have ever committed against their fellow humans. The Nazis rounded up Jews, homosexuals, gypsies, the handicapped, Polish, Ukrainians, and many other groups they deemed unworthy. They ripped children from their mothers, and they murdered children in front of their parents. They made their victims walk in horrible death marches, forced them into sweltering rail cars, and then made them travel for days without food or water. People would defecate, urinate, and puke all over each other in these rail cars, all to be taken to death camps where they were painfully exterminated with poisonous gas. Reports from guards talk of people in the chambers climbing over each other to try to claw their way out. They knew everyone was dead when the screaming stopped. The Nazis also performed gruesome experiments on young children, where victims were put into decompression chambers, drained of blood, or sewn together. The worst part was, most of the young men who carried out these killings and tortures were average people from Germany drafted into the military. We've identified over 10,000 camps, ghettos, and brothels the Nazis set up. Many of the so-called unfit were forced into slave labor for Volkswagen, BMW, Bayer, and many other companies. So it is not like the Germans did not know what was going on. The German population knew early on Hitler wanted to exterminate those he saw as unfit, and most did nothing when he started rounding people up. And worst of all, many joined in and helped him. Was this inhumane? This was completely human. Of course, it is sadly obvious to any student of history, Japan was probably far worse than Germany. The horrors they brought upon the Chinese people were thought to be unfathomable in a post-Enlightenment era. The Japanese army raped, tortured, and murdered more than 300,000 Chinese, and committed some of the most gruesome acts known to man. People were lined up in decapitation contests. Civilians were tied down and used for bayonet practice. Soldiers routinely would target women for gang rapes and torture, and more often than not, they targeted children. Many went beyond rape and disemboweled women, sliced off their breasts. They would hang men and women on hooks up by their tongues. Fathers were forced to rape their own daughters at gunpoint. People were buried alive, castrated, and roasted alive over fires. It was so bad that Nazi leaders, present in Nanking, intervened to put a stop to it. The Japanese army was so bad, Nazis couldn't even handle it. Was this inhumane? This was completely human. After the war, when Russia marched into Berlin, they did many of the same things to German civilians. Starving women who came out of their homes to search for food were targeted for gang rape by Russian soldiers. Fathers were forced to watch their daughters raped and tortured, and were forced to pick which soldier got to go first. In the USSR, people were tortured and enslaved in concentration camps in Siberia. Populations like the Ukrainians were selected to be starved to death. Parents were murdered in front of their children, but then the children were left alive to starve to death, as to not waste any bullets on them. Was this inhumane? This was completely human. Okay, but surely, these examples are extremes and the result of citizens being brainwashed by fascists and communists. It would be wonderful if that was all this was, but we see endless examples of these massacres throughout history. In Rwanda in 1994, people were tortured and raped and over 800,000 were murdered. 1.2 million Armenians were murdered by the Young Turks from 1915 to 1923. Roughly 2 million were murdered in Cambodia between 1975 and 1979. In Guatemala, thousands of Mayan Indians were murdered. The Reconciliation Commission of South Africa found that there were over 36,000 cases of abductions, rape, tortures, and killings. I could go on, talking about the genocide committed against the Rohingya Muslims, the rape epidemic in the Congo and Haiti, ISIS, the Taliban, Saddam Hussein's Iraq, the French military in Algeria, the British Empire in Tasmania, and many other lands they conquered, and even the slavery of Africans in the Western world and the genocide committed against Native Americans. On every continent in every century, genocide, rape, and war has been committed by humans, because that is what humans do. And I've only stuck with recent examples. Our history is filled with countless more examples and probably even more acts of genocide that were lost to time. Humans are murderous, selfish, evil creatures, and we have the audacity to call genocide inhumane. I would bet the hundreds of species we've directly caused to go extinct wish we were actually inhumane. And let's not pretend that we ourselves are somehow better than these other humans, or that we would never commit such horrible acts. Most of the people who ended up committing these terrible acts were terrifyingly normal. They did it out of hate, fear, pride, or just to be accepted by superiors. Holocaust survivor and Professor Freddie Katz says, "Only a tiny proportion of this century's massive killings are attributable to the actions of those people we call criminals, or crazy people, or socially alienated people, or even people we identify as evil people. The vast majority of killings were carried out by plain folk in the population, ordinary people like you and me."
Oh, they cover quite a few things in that particular video, but the last section was of particular interest because we talked about why people do bad things in terms of going against their program by using defense mechanisms. He listed 4 other factors here, because he points out that these people, like for example in Nazi Germany, these Jews were not tortured secretly. Okay, I mean, when you think about how, when they were enslaved, they were forced to work for the country's biggest companies. And so the general population knew what was going on, and they went along with it. Why? Why did normal people go along with horrific crimes? Hate was listed as one, where the government successfully convinced people to hate particular groups. Okay? Fear, big time. I have to go along with this, and this is a scary thing. When you're in a society where you have your needs met, like we have a situation where we've got plenty of food, shelter, protection, clothing, and all that stuff, we got an abundance for most people. All right, we don't have a situation of war. We don't have a situation where we might not have enough to eat. In situations where those things are threatened, it does become a little like Walking Dead. I remember when I first saw that, I'm going, this is ridiculous, man. We beat these dead people up in no time flat. It wouldn't be that crazy. But when you take a look at history, that's actually pretty accurate. When civilization falls apart, people all get like Negan, and that actually has happened so many times that to say we wouldn't be Neganized, all right, some of you know what I'm talking about, okay, where you become very barbaric when self-preservation becomes so important that you brutalize people who get in your way, right? It's normal people, okay? So hate was one, fear of I don't want to be next, I have to protect myself, okay? So hate, fear, pride, our people are the best, you people are inferior, hey, okay? And the last one, the desire to be accepted by people that are the in crowd, the people in power.
Psychologist Stanley Milgram had also looked at how we respond to authority. In order to understand how people were induced to obey unjust regimes and participate in atrocities such as the Holocaust, he set up an experiment. Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which, please? Teacher. Where? Teacher.
Separated by a screen, the teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud. Horse. Rock. House. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer, horse.
Oh. Experiment, that's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
Refuses to go on. The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're gonna get a shock. 180 volts.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of here.
Can't stand it. I'm not gonna kill that man there. I mean, who's gonna take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please. All right, next one. Slow. Walk, dance, truck, music.
Two-thirds of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering with less voltage. Can't you check in to see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis.
The Milgram study is one of the most famous studies in all of psychology, and it demonstrated that regular, everyday people will comply with an authority figure, even if it means going against their own moral values and harming others. But what can we take from this study? What can we learn from it? Well, the first thing that I want to mention is that this study has been replicated. And when it has, the results remain about the same. No matter what country or time period this has been tested in, full compliance has always hovered around 61 to 66%. But let's look a little closer at these results. Let's look a little bit closer at this 65% number. One thing that Milgram found when he interviewed participants following the study was that many of them were ashamed of what they had done. They really felt horrible about it. But some of the participants, even some of the ones who were ashamed, tended to speak poorly of the victims, claiming that he wouldn't have been shocked if he had been smarter, or if he had answered more questions correctly. And this is often known as the just world phenomenon. The idea that the universe is fair, so people must get what they deserve. So good things happen to good people, and bad things happen to bad people. And it seems that some people use this tendency to justify their actions, assuming that things had gone wrong for the victim because he was deficient in some way. Another thing that seemed to have a strong effect on participants' willingness to shock to the end was their ability to shed responsibility. Many participants seemed much more comfortable when the experimenter indicated that he would take full responsibility for what happened, and that the participant would not be responsible for any harm that he had done. And really think of this as it relates to the term, "I was just following orders." And of course, this is the excuse that we see not only in the Milgram study, but in many cases where people commit atrocities. They say, "I was just following orders," implying that someone else is responsible for what they have done.
So every time the person misses one, you give them a shock. And every successive shock gets worse and worse and worse. The last shock could actually kill them. Okay? And so you got the guy doing that. So when they miss one, you have to shock. And then you have the scientist over here telling, okay, you got to push it. Just push it. Push it. And so what they did was they brought the subjects in. Now what the subject doesn't know was that they're not really shocking the person. It's an actor who's going, woo, woo, woo. Okay, but it's not real. But this guy thinks it's real. And so the goal is to see how many people will give all the shocks, including the lethal shock. And so every time they do that, what they found is that no less than 70% of the people give all the shocks. No less than 70%. The last time they did it in 2014, it was 90%. Okay? In 2014. Because they were told. The doctor told me to. I was told 90% give. Only 10% of people says, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not going ahead. That tells you something about us.
They don't have a gun. They're just saying,
No, they're just saying, no, I'm paying you $4 for this thing. Yeah.
$4.
I forgot what I was. Yeah,
On Netflix, there's an amazing true to life story about that experiment and his life. Stanley Milgram. It's called I think it's called Experimenter. It's
Really?
amazing, and he actually says in there, I tried to change the experiment hundreds of times so that we would not get these same results. Because he was trying to prove that there was something genetically wrong with Nazi Germans.
Yes.
And he could not. He proved that just human beings in general will follow a lab coat,
It's
regardless
scary.
of what color the lab coat is.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying that this is true. We think we're so safe and we're so good because we have plenty. It's not a war situation. Nobody's threatening us or our families. But in situations, even here's a situation where it's not about food, it's just about, there's a guy in a lab coat telling me to. We're willing to go that far and to follow like that. For something stupid. Imagine what people would do with a corrupt government situation. My first wife was from Iraq, and they left Iraq because of Saddam Hussein. He killed lots of people, including relatives. My ex-uncle-in-law was Saddam Hussein's personal physician. Okay? But the thing is that the Ba'ath Party was very cruel, and so they left everything to come over here to get away from that. But the problem line in Iraq, so many people were paid spies of the Ba'ath Party that you had to live in terror, because if you reported, they came, they killed you, and charged you for the bullet. And that happened to several of my in-laws' cousins. Okay, that were exterminated. One cousin was killed because she complained there wasn't enough bread in the store. Okay, and somebody told on her. These are not sociopaths. This is general. That's the thing. So it tells you, when the question is, why is it, if we have innate morality, why are we so bad? We have lots of excuses. We also have dark things inside of us. Hatred and fear and the desire to be accepted. Okay? Alright, so let's move on to something happy. Okay. I don't know what that is. Okay. What's that?
You have people dancing.
Yeah, people dancing. Okay. All right. Now, when it comes to love and belonging, these horrible behaviors. Now, we talked about the really dark stuff, but there are a lot of things that aren't murder, that aren't rape, that are lesser crimes, but still it damages relationships. Love and belonging is important because we don't want to be alone. We don't want to feel alone. We need to feel connected. We need affection from some source. And we need to answer the question, does anyone genuinely care about me, or am I all alone? Here's an example from way back earlier in my career, and I never forgot this. Couple came in, and they weren't there for couples counseling, but they came together, so here they are fighting in my office, okay? And here's the situation, is that he was addicted to internet pornography, and he did not see that it was a problem. Okay, it's like, this is what I like. I'm not cheating on you because these aren't real people, so this should be okay. And she felt cheated on. She felt that this was inappropriate and damaging to their relationship. The number one cause of male impotence is pornography addiction. Okay, and so she was sick of it and she wanted to stop. She thought it was wrong, and he's like, no, you need to get over this because this is not wrong. Now, if you don't agree on morality, the likelihood of this relationship surviving is pretty much zero. Okay? This is one of the most important things that couples need to agree on. Now, do you have to agree on every single tippity thing? No. But on big things, yeah, you need to agree. And if you fall out of compliance, there needs to be a heartfelt apology. That's what's necessary if you're ever to be reconciled, because people have fights, people have arguments. There needs to be an opportunity to reconcile. And if you don't agree on morality, I can't believe that your apology is sincere. If you don't really think it was wrong, if you think that porn is fine, and then why are you apologizing? Because you don't believe it. All right? All right. In order to apologize and have it be accepted and be reconciled, there are elements of an apology that need to be present. I am sorry for... What are you sorry about? What did you do? Okay? Be specific. Next thing. That was wrong because... Do you understand why it was wrong? Do you understand how deeply it bothers me that you do that? All right? Why was that wrong? Third, next time I need some assurance that you're not going to do that again. Okay? And then, will you forgive me? You ask for forgiveness. And then, what can I do to make things better? What can I do to fix this? That's a complete apology, and a sincere apology offered with all those elements is more likely to be accepted so that you can go on with the relationship. But those elements need to be there. I'm sorry for if anything I did bothered you. That's not an apology, okay? That's like, if I did something wrong, I'm sorry. That is completely worthless. You just wasted your breath. You said nothing. You communicated nothing. Okay? That was wrong because if you don't believe it's wrong, I have no confidence that you're ever going to change. Okay, so these are really important. Do you think any of this is optional? In order to be reconciled, are any of these steps optional? No. Anybody with common sense can look at that and go, yeah, that's pretty much what's necessary. All right? Agreement on morality is important, but do we have to agree 100%? No. No. Part of love relationships is that when it comes to mild offenses, you let that stuff slide. Okay, we're not like, for example, leaving smudges on appliances. All right, now is that mild, moderate, or severe? There are people that put that in the severe category, by the way. Okay, all right, and if you disagree on that, you shouldn't marry somebody who's smudgy. All right, so is it a mild offense? Is it a moderate offense or a severe offense? Moderate and severe offenses, stealing, lying, breaking things, losing things, the moderate and severe offenses, you need to agree on those, and those will require some apology and for reconciliation. The mild stuff, let people, you don't want to control people, all right? You don't want to be so manipulative that everybody has to do exactly the way you want. And so some things you let slide. That's part of love, okay? You give people freedom to be themselves, and you don't insist on, come on, some of these things, you don't break up relationships over small differences. You have to allow for small differences because people are different. But when it comes to those moderate and severe offenses, you need to agree on that stuff. Because even when you violate, then I can accept that your apology is sincere. That's why agreement on the moral code is so important. Does anybody not see how that works? You see how it works? Okay. All right. So we also need to agree on the category. I think I mentioned that already. All right. So for moderate and severe offenses, you need a heartfelt apology. If we habitually, unapologetically behave unethically, we end up alienating ourselves from the very people we could potentially help. That has to go with purpose. So we just got through talking about how is ethics related to love, how is ethics related to purpose. And I only have one slide to this, and this is it. When you think about what our purpose is, when you grow up and figure out what your skills are, what are your gifts, what does God put you here to do, almost invariably it involves helping people. It involves using your experiences and abilities to help other people. That's part of our fulfillment. Okay, that's what it means for most people to be fulfilled, is using your gifts to help others. All right? If you alienate them through unethical behavior, if nobody likes you, if nobody respects you, the likelihood of you being able to carry out that purpose is very diminished. Okay? So, there's that. So let's move on. What about the next thing? Honor or respect. What does it mean to honor? We need honor. It means to regard with great respect. They honored their parents in all they did. Now, what does respect mean? Well, first of all, this goes to Maslow's hierarchy, okay? Maslow put down here, your physiological needs, and safety needs are way down here. But you know what? There is some truth to these guys down here, because if you look at people's behaviors during the Second World War and throughout all these genocidal situations, when people's safety and food and shelter are threatened, look what they turn into. Now, where you get some disagreement with Maslow is you look at Viktor Frankl. In Man's Search for Meaning, he offered a rebuttal to that. Because Frankl commented that while he was in the concentration, he was a psychiatrist also. Frankl, they all studied under Freud, right? And Viktor Frankl was totally on board with Freud until they threw him in a concentration camp. And he got a chance to see what happens to humans in severe deprivation situations. And one thing that really caught his attention, he wrote the entire book in like one weekend. It was like this one mad flurry. And it was like a bestseller, and I mean, it was incredible, very popular. And to this day, it's a very deep book. I highly recommend it. But one of the things that he comments on was that as he watched his fellow Jews in the concentration camp, what he noticed was that some of the people he knew before the concentration camps, and he noticed that people that had a firm ethical code, that had strong religious convictions, strong beliefs that certain behaviors are right no matter what. He saw people literally starving to death, give their food away because they saw somebody else who was suffering. And they starved to death earlier because they saw suffering. And even though they themselves were dying, they still practiced love in that situation. It got his attention to where he says, you know what? Meaning is more important than survival. For humans, meaning is, as Man's Search for Meaning says, meaning is that important. People with no meaning reverted to animals. He talks about the capos. You guys know what capos are? Capos were the Jews that helped the Nazis. In exchange for extra food and for safety, they were more barbarous than the Germans. And after they were liberated, the Jews turned on the capos and killed them. Okay, if they found them, they killed them because they were so angry about the brutality that their fellow Jews did to them. But why did they do it? Extra food, safety. I don't want to go. I don't want to be gassed. I don't want to be burned. So I am paid to treat my relatives with barbarism, and they did. Okay, and so Maslow was right. If you do not have convictions about right and wrong, good and evil, under circumstances, normal people turn barbarous if those needs aren't met. So anyway, going back to, okay, so then it goes love and belonging, which is number one after that, which we all agree on. Next one is respect. So that's a big need. The need to feel self-respect and to be respected by others. That's an important need. And what we see today are behaviors that are accepted in our culture that make it difficult to be respected. Okay? What is it? Respect, to admire someone as a result of their abilities, qualities, or achievements. So in order to experience respect, you should have abilities, qualities, and achievements. Okay? It's important that people use their skills somehow, that they actually, be able to do stuff. And self-respect is to admire yourself as a result of abilities, qualities, and achievements. Now here's the thing. The things that you respect yourself for, you can respect yourself for the wrong things. Okay? And that's where this particular moral code can be really perverted in bad ways. Okay? So I think part of our job as mental health professionals is we want people to respect themselves for the right reasons. Because if you're respecting yourself for the wrong reason, you can be sabotaged in every other area of need. One mutation of need for respect is to admire someone only as a result of their abilities because they're the best. You see that with the perfectionist parents who kid comes home with a B+. And it's like, worthless, stupid. Yeah, I've seen this. I don't know if you've seen it. If you've been around, you've seen it too, where you have overly critical parents who don't accept anything but the best, and so they don't give their praise unless it's the best. All right. So that's kind of a perversion. You're not to be respected, and you don't respect others unless they're the best. They have to have the best job. They have to be the best at sports, the best at academia. You got to be better than everybody else, and only then do you deserve any kind of praise. Another mutation of respect is being feared. Being feared feels a lot like being respected. And that's the pull of being in a gang. Being in a gang gives you a sense of fulfillment, because if you come from a situation where you have not been respected, you come a gang, people fear you, and now you've got something that feels like respect. That's a mutation of the need for respect. Okay? Being feared and being respected feel the same. In order to be respected and to respect yourself, you need meaningful abilities, qualities, and achievements. And again, this goes back to my marijuana talk. One of the things that should bother all of us about young people before the age of 25 using THC is it blocks brain maturation. That working memory and emotional regulation that you would have gotten, you get stuck in a child brain, your abilities are impaired for the rest of your life. This is very devastating. Your ability to be respected, therefore, is being attenuated. Okay? That's why this is really ugly, because people who maybe would have grown up and had a great job and been able to support families and have a lifestyle that they're happy with and be respected is cut short, because now they're stuck working at Walmart for the rest of their life, because their abilities don't go beyond that, and they could have. They could have. In order to be respected and to respect yourself, you need meaningful achievements. All right, so what do you need? You need those recognizable achievements, and you also need people in your inner circle willing and able to show their admiration. Okay, very important, because you can have somebody who's doing great. They're trying. They're using what they have to pull themselves up into a better place. And you know what? Their friends, their family, nobody's supportive. I talk a lot about inner circle hygiene. You need people in your life to kind of be a cheerleader. You need some people like that who are mature and who are willing to take a look at what you're trying to do and give you some encouragement. Hey, good job. You know, we need that. And if all the people in your inner circle are manipulative, drug users, immature, you're not going to get that. So inner circle hygiene is very important because you need respect. You need somebody to give you a pat on the back every now and then. Okay? As mental health professionals, we want people to be admired for positive character traits.
Do you want something else? Coffee?
No. What I'd like is to take you out sometime this weekend, maybe, if you're. I really like you, and you're really hot, and I think about you all the time.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's really nice, but I'm in a relationship.
Why are you so nice to me, but you don't want to go out with me?
Ms. Large Coffee, room for milk.
You did everything right. She's a tease and a liar. Women love to lead men on. Yeah, I've seen how long she's been toying with you.
What do you want?
Have a private practice. I know you think you're alone in this world, but you're not.
Never done therapy before.
You just say whatever comes into your mind.
In movies, people lie on the couch. Should I do that?
It's usually women who lie on the couch. So why did you come in today?
You saw what Linda did to me in the coffee shop.
I did. How did that make you feel?
It sucks. Like, I'm sure she probably told all her stupid coworkers and friends. How was I supposed to know she gives everyone a nickname? And what kind of person does that, anyway? You have to find a new coffee shop.
Why would you do that? By going to another shop, you give her your power. She's the winner, and you're the loser. And I don't work with losers. It was nice meeting you.
I'm not a loser. I won't go to a new coffee shop. I promise.
If we're to continue, you need to take this in. You hold the power to make your life what you want. You need to get back at her.
How? If I do anything to her, she'll tell the police.
People generally don't believe women. They overreact and are emotional. And if you do it right, she'll be too embarrassed to tell anyone. Be a man. She crapped on you. You crap on her.
All right. So what was the point of that little vignette? That some therapists can be really, really bad? Well, that might be the case. Hopefully most are not quite like that. The point of it is to bring this out. While we do have some inherent virtues, we have a sense of right and wrong that does appear to be genetically based. Those moral values can be corrupted or mutated, if you will, into something kind of maladaptive. All right? What do I mean by that? Well, let's take some virtues. Let's take integrity, for example. It's good to have integrity. You know, you don't want to be corrupted. You don't want to sell out. You want to stand for something, for values that are true and solid, and you want to be consistent with that. All right? However, you can have such high integrity that you can become legalistic. I'm the best person there is. Nobody has values that meet my standards. And so you end up becoming very legalistic and hyper-judgmental. So here we have a value that is inherent that taken to an extreme can end up, instead of being a virtue, it becomes a vice. All of these genetic virtues can be, if selfishly applied, turned into a vice. Take foolishness. If you're, act on impulse and behave in ways that are counterproductive and counterintuitive, that's a bad thing. You want discernment. You want to act wisely, but if you really pride yourself in your really wise choices, then you can become very judgmental of other people's opinions if yours always have to be the best. And it goes that way with love as well. I'm not talking about self-sacrificial, divine kind of love. I'm talking about love as people generally use the term as, I like this a lot. If you don't have enough of it, we can be selfish, and that goes for all forms of love. Or if we're too enabling, because we call ourselves loving people and wanting to give them lots and lots of freedom, we can and become enablers. We see this a lot when you have an adult child who is still living at home at 35 and the parents just give up on them and they let them live in the basement and play video games and watch TV all day. This love has turned into enabling a bad behavior. You see it with substance abuse disorders a lot of times as well, where one partner will go along with the substance abuse out of love because they don't want to hurt the other one's feelings or start a fight, and they want peace, and so they allow a behavior to take place that is destructive and maladaptive, okay, without saying anything. Pride, or humility, for example. If you have too little humility, that leads to pride. If you have an outrageous amount of humility, then you see yourself as a loser all the time, comparing yourself with other people constantly, and what might be considered humble is taken to such an extreme that it's gone beyond humble to be self-deprecating, constantly seeing the worst in yourself and assuming the very worst, and therefore not believing that you're worth loving. So what the point is, with all of these virtues that you see here, they can be, if selfishly applied, can be taken to an extreme as to lead to a vice. Now, in the example that we just saw there, you saw this kid who had a crush on this girl at the coffee shop, and he expressed his affection in whatever weird way he did it, but he expressed it and he got shot down. And then he instantly became very angry. And his reaction was, you shouldn't have been so nice to me, shouldn't have led me on. It's your fault that I feel this bad. And so what we have here is an individual who's wounded and who needs somebody to blame. And so he blames her. Because the way he sees it, I'm an innocent guy, minding my own business, speaking my heart, and you come along and you ran over me. Selfishly and irresponsibly, you led me on, and it's your fault. And so I'm a good person who's been wounded by a bad person, and therefore you need to pay. And that's a thing, that's a real thing. Whenever we see ourselves as a really good person, well, for one thing, nobody's that good, okay? I don't care how good you are, we all have flaws and we all need to grow. And some people, they have such poor self-worth at the very beginning of their lives, and it's so deeply ingrained that anything that makes them feel shame, they automatically don't want to think about it, they don't want to accept it, and they use a defense mechanism to protect themselves from the feelings of shame. So when somebody corrects them, rather than accept the correction, they immediately throw it back in their face, and they do a defense mechanism. They rationalize their behavior, or they project their behavior onto somebody else, and they accuse the person of attacking them unjustly. And unfortunately, when you do that, you are constantly seeing yourself as a good person being hurt by bad people. And our sense of justice, our sense of fairness says, hey, it's not fair for bad people to hurt good people, and my fairness calls for justice. There needs to be, I need to get even with you, because you, a bad person, have hurt me, a righteous person, and you need to pay. That's what happens when I told you about that innate sense of, treat others the way you want to be treated. Well, this is the mutation of treat others the way you want to be treated. When you selfishly apply that, it's people should treat me the way I want to be treated. And if they don't, they have violated this, and that violation demands justice. Okay? So again, here you see, this is how a virtue, when selfishly applied, becomes a vice. Now, I mentioned earlier that our consciousness is divided into 4 segments. The 3 organic sections to our consciousness start out with the reptile brain, and this is our basic instincts, basic survival, basic fear, basic hunger for that which is satisfying and nurturing and pleasurable, and basic aversion of things that are not pleasant. And then on top of that, you have your mammalian brain, or your rat brain, okay? And this is where your emotion comes in. This is where we like things, things make us happy, or things make us sad, things make us afraid. And the mammalian brain and the reptile brain are both biologically super based. And so the bottom line, what do these animals want? They want to feel pleasure, and they want to avoid pain. That's what they want. That's the purpose of their life, to feel pleasure and avoid pain. Now, the rational brain has the ability to consider what the animal wants, but the rational brain also is able to look at one's future and look at one's family and loved ones and says, okay, how is this thing that I'm planning on doing, how is this going to help or hurt my future, my loved ones, my reputation, and so forth. And so the rational brain has the ability to modify the behavior of the organism so that you don't destroy one's future. Now, that's a good thing. However, you think, well, which of these are, and then they have the spiritual brain. Oh, it's not part of your brain, it's consciousness that is non-biological, and I've talked about that before. But let's just talk about these organic brains. You'd think, if you were to ask the question, which of these 3 aspects to your consciousness, these 3 sections to your brain, which of these 3 is good and which is evil? And if you're in elementary school, you'd automatically say, well, the animal, the rat, and the lizard, those are the bad guys. And the rational brain is the good one who's constantly fighting the urges of the lower brain. And to some degree, there's something to that. If you take a look at things like murder and rape and things, the animal brains are calling the shots, so you got something there. However, the really wicked stuff comes from the rational brain. Okay, if you think about that video we just saw, these individuals, we see that good people did horrific things, genocidal things, and that wasn't the animal brain calling the shots. That was the rational brain. The rational brain coming up with reasons why these people needed to be exterminated. And the rational brain does that. It comes up with reasons why we can mistreat certain people, reasons why we can steal a little here, reasons why we can lie on the witness stand, reasons why we don't have to pay back our debts. All right? That's the rational brain. See, the thing is, the rational brain is engaged when we employ those defense mechanisms. That's the rational brain. Now, what does all of this have to do with feeling fulfillment? Well, if our rational brains are in the habit of doing these things, of coming up with excuses for maladaptive behaviors, You still get the consequences. Even though we've told ourselves that we had an excuse for doing that, we still get the consequences of those behaviors. It costs us love when we behave irresponsibly and selfishly. It costs us relationships. People lose affection for us. It costs us purpose. It can end up losing a job or end up losing your ability to help somebody because nobody respects you. Okay? Which brings us to the third one, respect. All right? Very often when we do behaviors, a lot of times the animal brain says, hey, I know what we can do. Let's drink a couple pints of vodka. All right? That would be really nice. Haven't done that in a while, so let's go ahead and do that. And then the rational brain says, yeah, I can get an Uber and go home. Or, yeah, I haven't done it in a long time, so it's okay now. But the rational brain, by giving us the okay to do this kind of stuff, we end up doing bad things. And then later, our futures are in trouble. Our health is damaged, and people don't respect us like they used to. And we lose respect for ourselves. So that's where I bring all this stuff in, because this is where ethics comes into play, and you can see how ethics is interwoven with all three of our brains, both the employment of ethics and the violation of ethical code. So even though it's genetically in there, we don't have to follow those rules in a perfect way so that it always benefits us. Our rational brain has the ability to take those innate values and mutate them in selfish ways so that we don't look like a species that has an ethical code at all sometimes. Very often, usually around the time when I do a psychiatric evaluation on a patient, I will go over these 5 things, and I'll ask the patient, I'll explain to them, these are the 5 things that you need in order to experience fulfillment: love and belonging, purpose, respect, freedom, and positive emotion. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and do you know how many times I've had patients say, stop, wait a minute, I disagree. I disagree. Not once. Nobody disagrees with these. When you hear them, it's like, duh, of course. Now, especially when you get to autonomy. Nobody's going to argue that autonomy is necessary for feeling fulfilled. Right? What would you rather be, free or in jail? Come on. Nobody says yes to imprisonment. But there are other ways your autonomy can be stripped from you besides prison. Very often, people are in relationships with individuals who have personality disorders. And one of the things about personality disorders is that individuals very commonly are manipulative, especially if it's cluster B personality disorders. So those are things like borderline, narcissistic, antisocial personality, histrionic personality disorder. These individuals tend to behave in selfish fashions and are manipulative, especially borderlines and antisocials and narcissistics. And so what does manipulation look like? Well, whenever you do a behavior to somebody that you wouldn't want done to you, and you do it to them to make sure they do what you want. I want to make sure you don't screw things up for me. I'm going to make sure that you fly right. And they do things like, the number one tool of manipulation is lying, prevarication. I'm going to tell you what I need to, I'm going to say what I need to say to get you to do what I want, whatever it takes, okay? So that's basically just lying, just deception. I'm going to say what needs to be said to get you to do what I want. And then there is verbal abuse, there's physical abuse, there's threatening to do verbal or physical abuse, the use of guilt trips, the use of shame, such as comparing you to other people. Why can't you be more like your brother, okay? Why can't you be more like so-and-so? That's a shame tool. We do that to make people feel bad, to threaten them with worse feelings so that they will do what we want, or so that they won't do what we don't want them to do. Okay? That's manipulation. Now, whenever in your inner circle, whenever you are surrounded with manipulative people, you don't have very much autonomy. You're being treated like a child. You're being controlled, if you will, or there are constant attempts to control you, so that you're really not allowed to behave as a morally free agent, because you're constantly, being threatened. You're being lied to, being wounded physically, emotionally, to make sure that you fly right. As a result, you lack autonomy and you will lack fulfillment. Now, that's on you, okay? Because one of the responsibilities that you have is to maintain what we call inner circle hygiene. Inner circle hygiene is when you identify somebody in your inner circle. The inner circle people are people you share your life with. When you get home from work, you call them up and say, hey, this was my day. Okay, that's an inner circle person. You're sharing your dreams and your hopes, your aspirations, your triumphs, your failures, your struggles. All that private stuff, you're putting it out there because you're intimate with them. You're intimate, verbally intimate. You're having this interchange back and forth, and you're putting them in a position that somebody who's trustful. It's a trusting position, and if they're manipulative, they're going to stab you in the back with that. Okay, that's not a good thing. That's what's going to happen. And so inner circle hygiene is very important, that you kick people out of that inner circle who are habitually manipulative. You need freedom. You need individuals in that inner circle who are capable of genuine love. And part of love is giving people freedom to make mistakes. Okay, so autonomy is very important. We don't like jobs that rob us of autonomy. If you got a job where your boss is standing over you, judging everything you do, micromanaging you, correcting you, I don't care how much it pays, you're not going to like that job. We prefer jobs where they give us the project and say, use your skills to solve this problem. There you go. And we have a certain amount of time, and we are allowed to solve it as we see fit. That's autonomy, and we like those jobs. We like those jobs. So autonomy is a very big part of freedom. And some people, they have children, and as the children grow up, what's supposed to happen is you give them increasing autonomy as they age. And some parents fail to do that. And they're still treating their 16-year-old like a 6-year-old, and that's going to lead to some significant rebellion. And if there's not rebellion outwardly, there'll be rebellion inwardly, and that sometimes manifests as depression. Okay, so autonomy, a very big important part of fulfillment. Eckhart Tolle said, the true salvation is a state of freedom from fear, from suffering, from a perceived state of lack and insufficiency, and therefore from all wanting, needing, grasping, and clinging. It is freedom from compulsive thinking, from negativity, and above all from past and future as a psychological need. And I'm thinking, wow, yeah, that's really free, but you know what that sounds like? Yeah, because that sounds like a little bit too free here, all right? Now, when you dissect what he just said, he's right. I mean, I actually agree with him. But when you look at it on its face, it's like free from all wanting, needing, grasping, and clinging. That's like half my day, okay? So, it might be that might be this nirvana extreme here, but you get the idea. You get the idea. Ultimately, autonomy comes down to freedom from excessive manipulation. Excessive. You can't block yourself from people attempting to manipulate you. There will always be people in your world who will attempt manipulation. Just don't put them in your inner circle. Don't shun them necessarily. I mean, you don't come at them and say, hey, you're a manipulator, get out of my life. And it doesn't work like that. Sometimes you have to work for these people, okay? Autonomy can be defined as the ability to make choices according to one's own free will. If we feel coerced by even an internal pressure like guilt or shame, to say nothing of external pressures like other people, our feeling of autonomy vanishes. And, you know, probably you don't need to see a study to validate this. You kind of know this. I think most people will probably say, yeah, that's probably true, because in some of my other programs, I talk about the effects of stress and blood chemistry and how being depressed, being anxious, being angry increases inflammation throughout your body and accelerates the aging process, and it promotes many disease processes. Arteriosclerosis, cancer, strokes, everything. I mean, it's really negative emotion contributes to our death. It contributes to our aging and physical decline. So it's probably not surprising that lack of autonomy increases interleukin-6 levels. Interleukin-6 is one of those inflammatory markers that is very, very sensitive to emotional change. And the higher your interleukin-6 levels, the more it very much results in increased risk of things like autoimmune disorders and cardiovascular problems. Okay, so not surprising that we have studies showing that the lower your autonomy, the higher your interleukin-6 levels. I'll talk more about this when we get to positive emotion. So then what am I to do about this? Well, inner circle hygiene. Inner circle hygiene. The people in my life, my friends, my family. Okay, I can't control those people, but the people I am closest to, the inner circle people, I can control that. I can control who I tell my secrets to. I can control who I make my bestest friend ever, okay? And if they are habitually, not apologetically manipulative, you need to boot them from the inner circle to one of the outer rings. This is my circle of trust. This is you outside of the inner circle. Autonomy at work, and okay, how to say this in? The degree to which a job provides substantial freedom and discretion to the individual in scheduling the work and in determining the procedure to be used in carrying it out. Okay, so I wrote that really dumb. Now, as we get older, our motivation needs to change. If it doesn't change, then we will find ourselves unfulfilled. As young people, as children, and people who are young, 20s, I consider that kind of young still. But when you're young, your values are pretty extrinsic. You like money and drugs and anything that gets love, sex, positive. Those are things that feed the animal brain. Okay, those are extrinsic motivators. So whatever your dog would like, that's extrinsic. And dogs aren't crazy about money, but if you translate that money into food, then dogs can be greedy too, all right? So it's about the animal. I want. Greed is a part of the animal brain because the animal likes security. And money represents security, all right? So money, treasure, drugs, pleasure, those are extrinsic things. And intrinsic motivators are things like autonomy, mastery, purpose, relationships. Okay, those are intrinsic. Autonomy, freedom. We like jobs that give us autonomy. Mastery. Another thing that makes a job pleasurable is if we use more than 1% of our brain in doing it. We don't like jobs that we believe a fifth grader can do. We would like to feel a little bit challenged. We would like, that kind of contributes to our self-respect, that we have a position that utilizes our skills, the things that make us us, that make us special, all right? We would like a job that takes advantage of our specialness, okay? And purpose. We like jobs that are actually valuable and achieve something meaningful. If you were going to be offered a job, one that paid $100 an hour, where you blew up balloons all day, and another job that paid $75 an hour, but that you were involved in making prosthetic limbs for handicapped children all day long. And they were both equally challenging in terms of how many calories you expended, so none of them put your body at risk or anything. Which job would you choose? Day after day, blowing up balloons, or day after day, making something that is actually going to make a big difference in the lives of another human being? Okay, most of us would take the $25 pay cut because every day is a long time. For every day, five days a week, 40 hours a week, blowing up balloons, that would get tiresome, man. I mean, seriously, I don't think I'd like that job because it's kind of purposeless. All right, mastery. Am I utilizing my full potential to become recognized as an expert in what I do? As we age, our values need to change from extrinsic to intrinsic. What if they don't? What if they don't? Well, you're not going to be happy. If you're still basing your life, basing your happiness on how good you look and how much money you have, well, the aging process, is not going to be your friend, because those are things that you can't hang on to. Money goes up and down, and your looks go kind of down as you age, all right? And if you're comparing yourself with other people, which is another extrinsic thing, again, you'll never win that. Wisdom tells you that there will always be somebody with more. There will always be somebody with more of the good things and less of the bad things. And you'll never find peace that way. That's just a grown-up reality. However, if your values are intrinsic, these are things that can get better with age. You know, your IQ goes up until you're 65 years old if you keep learning, if you keep being active and not watching TV all day. For most humans, your IQ has the potential to go up until you're 65. That means as you age, you get better. You get better, okay? Your relationships can be deepened. Your mastery, you become a recognized expert and you just get better and better at it. So these are intrinsic things that can improve over time, leading to greater levels of fulfillment as you age. Next, we come to our last item that is necessary for fulfillment, and that is positive emotion.